Hello everyone, welcome back to Ready Resilience. Today I want to talk about traumatic brain injury. What is it? What's the cause of it? And I want to talk a little bit about mine. As I stated in my 10-year anniversary video, I was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, and I think I covered pretty much about how I got mine. But a lot of people don't understand traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injury basically is a jolt or a blunt force to the head. You can jar your head, shaking it. It would have to be a hard jar. But there are some that have a traumatic brain injury or TBI from a light jar. Don't know why. But the brain is pretty weird in that even the smartest neuroscientists don't fully understand the brain. And I will say that traumatic brain injury isn't exclusive to war veterans. There are a lot of people that get traumatic brain injury, and we're going to also talk about PTSD on this channel, which I'm kind of wanting to talk a little bit about traumatic brain injury first before I get into that subject, which may be a while, I don't know. If you want to know a little bit about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, before I get there and my experiences with it, let me know in the comments. But traumatic brain injury is a difficult thing. There are some people that just get hit in the head. Let's say you're in a fight and somebody hits you in the head, it could cause a concussion. That is, at the very minimum, a brain injury, a concussion. And then it goes up to mild, and then it could even go all the way up to severe. From my understanding is that a severe brain injury is when there has been a hole in your head and there has been something maybe hit the brain. But I will tell you that a brain injury, whether you have jolted your head, whether you've been hit in the head, or whether you have been hit so much as far as cracking your skull or even making a hole in your skull, it's still pretty bad. And this is something that when I went through this whole thing in the very beginning in 2008, they did not know very much about it. As I was going through treatment, especially when it comes to this traumatic brain injury for war veterans, it was a new thing. And now, just a few years ago, they have deemed traumatic brain injury as the signature injury or signature wound of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, because a lot of us out in combat get blown up, and that was my job. I went to look for these IEDs. I went to hunt them down. I was always around explosives. One of the things that I brought up to people who were treating me and when I was going through therapy, I didn't know this, but the more I studied about traumatic brain injury, I started stumbling across things such as complex traumatic brain injury. I don't think practitioners use that phrase very often. I think if they don't use it, it's a disservice to especially those who are in combat. Us sappers, we are out there hunting for IEDs. We get blown up. We think we got our bell rung, or we have a decent IED go off near us and then we get a concussion. But from everything that I've studied and researched on traumatic brain injury is that the more you hit your head, the more complex the traumatic brain injury is. And I think that's why mine was so bad when I finally did get diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, because I had already been deployed 3 times, been blown up, or I've been around different blasts. Like say for instance, a blast would go off near the truck in front of me or behind me, or there would be just little blasts that have gone off around me. And we had some major IEDs go off around us as sappers. But I always say that I got hit with 4 IEDs because there were IEDs that consisted of more than a couple 155s. And when I say 155, those are 155 millimeter shells that made up the IEDs. So there were 4 of those. And the time that I was finally hit and sent to Walter Reed was when I got hit in the head with that windshield wiper. I'll link that video in the description below, just in case you haven't seen it. However, there was a lot that went on during that blast. The blast waves coming up, the fact that my head was jarred around, and then my head hit a solid structure in the vehicle so hard that it made it loose. And again, there are a couple videos that I'll link in the description about that. It was a major event in my life. So there are several ways you could get a traumatic brain injury, and it is not a injury that only combat veterans can get. But we as combat veterans that worked out in combat have a high percentage of us that have the traumatic brain injury. And I would say that most of those traumatic brain injuries are complex, because who wants to admit that things are going on with their brain, especially if you're a leader in combat and you had this desire to keep going when you're in the military and as a leader. And so what are the symptoms of this? Well, at first I'm going to tell you that you're going to go through a lot of changes. When I first got hit with that last IED, I couldn't walk, my balance was off, I couldn't catch a thought, my concentration was just all over the place. And if I did try to walk for distances of times, I felt like I was going to vomit. My eyes were so messed up that I couldn't even really, my eyes wouldn't even focus. My head at the time felt so bad that when I laid my head down on the pillow, it felt like a blood blister. Next time you get a blood blister on your finger or something of that sort, and I'm not recommending you to do this, but when you get a blood blister, just push on it, see how it felt, see how it feels. And that's what it felt like when I would try to lay my head down. So there was a lot of things going on. And after my flight from Iraq to Germany, because of the altitude, I started stuttering. I don't understand why, but once I landed in Germany, something happened in my mind, in my brain, that just caused me to start stuttering. And I stuttered for a long time. As a matter of fact, when I went to Walter Reed, I did speech therapy, and I had an excellent speech therapist there. I wish I knew who it was. I forgot the name. She was great, because at that time there were still research that needed to be done on traumatic brain injury, how it affects a soldier with IEDs and everything. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in probably my next video, because at this moment I feel a little more comfortable talking about my traumatic brain injury than my PTSD. It's just difficult to talk about the PTSD right now. I think it might be helpful to talk about that, but it's going to take time, I guess. And I'll get there. And so there are a lot of symptoms that you can have from a traumatic brain injury. Just think about it. Your brain controls everything. It controls everything about you. And even after that blast, there were doctors saying, oh, well, you'll get better. And I had a lot of hope that within a year that I would be back out on the line, back at work and fulfilling my duties as a soldier. But as I went through therapy and not much happened within that first year or 2 years, very little progress, because I just went through a lot during that specific blast. I lost hope and I ended up getting depressed, and that is another symptom of traumatic brain injury and also PTSD. And that's why they say traumatic brain injury and PTSD is the perfect storm for soldiers. But after a couple years of that traumatic brain injury and going through treatment and everything, when I finally started keeping myself out of the hospital because I would go to the hospital frequently because of the migraines. My migraines would hurt so bad. They still hurt. As a matter of fact, I still take a migraine medicine to this day, 10 years later, and I get the Botox done for migraines, and I still get them. But once I started staying out of the hospital and started working on things such as reading, trying to read and overcome a lot of the things cognitively that I was going through, because my memory was so bad I couldn't even read anything and retain what I had read. By the way, there was a pause right there. And I do the same thing when I am giving speeches and teaching and things of that sort, because I look for words. It's a thing that they call word find. Even 10 years after, I do the word find. And I think it's important that I point that out so that you know that is part of traumatic brain injury. Now, I know a lot of people that do have some of these symptoms with their traumatic brain injury, and they recover and they overcome and go on and live full lives. And as a matter of fact, I am living as full as I can, but there are still some things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Probably one of the worst things that I went through was dealing with this TBI, because as I had stated before, I had such a great memory, photographic memory at that. I had a lot going for me, and I lost so much after that last blast. I mean, just me personally, such as my memory, such as cognitively, I couldn't do a lot of things. I wasn't me anymore. And I'm telling you this so that if you're watching this and you are new to the traumatic brain injury, and you'll know you could get over all of it, because I have seen people that do, or you could still have remnants of these things. In either case, if you have recently been diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, don't lose hope. And the worst thing you could do is let that blackness and that depression bring you down. That is the worst thing to do. Work hard, do what your occupational therapists tell you to do, your speech therapist, all of them. Do what they say to do, and even go above and beyond. Especially if you're a soldier, you know what going above and beyond means. Do more, but don't kill yourself doing it, because one thing that I did learn is that I will do too much and I get totally mentally and physically exhausted. And even to today I get that way. And so I do a lot of time management. And that's what you're going to have to do, is go through these time managements and things of that sort. I'll talk a little bit more about how I got as far as I did in this recovery process. I just wanted to make this video so that you'll know exactly what to look for in yourself, what traumatic brain injury is, and what the symptoms are. I'm going to end the video here. I will see you again next video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit that big red button. It would really help the channel out. Let's get the word out about this channel. Hit the share button. And I will let you know that I am not a medical professional, meaning that I am not a practitioner in the neuroscience field. I am simply someone who has studied counseling and someone who has experience of all of this. But with that being said, have a blessed day, and I will see you again next video.